Cambridge and with Sean is a Weirding Way Media podcast.
Obsess much.
Hello and welcome to Cambridge and with Sean, a podcast by two weird guys about the weird things that they like. I'm Mark Bigley.
And I am Ronnie, otherwise known as Skelevator on the YouTubes.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
With the hip lingo.
Yeah. Smash that like button.
Like and subscribe.
It's so annoying. I know.
Today we're continuing the path of lost and found items, which started with the one plastic rock ball.
Looks like a rock, acts like a ball.
Mm-hmm.
On our bonus episode, Ronnie, you mentioned something that I believe is going to be your first topic of the day.
That's correct.
And then that inspired me to look for another mystery item from my path that is part of a larger discussion, but I'm going to work backwards here. Since I already acquired this thing, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it, and then the bigger obsession that it is a part of will be something we get into when we talk about bands and music at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming in the second season. Let's see, we recorded the One Plastic Rock Ball bonus episode on the 13th. You mentioned a item on that episode that you had been trying to find for a long time. And then I believe it was the next day you texted me that you had discovered what it was.
I'm telling you.
The day after that, because I was inspired by that, I thought, okay, I've got these other two mystery things that I still haven't solved. I'm going to look for it. And I figured that one out. All that said, why don't you take us back to what that item or concept was that you brought up on the One Plastic Rock Ball episode?
It's really funny and strange how when we mention something on this show, it enters the zeitgeist and then emerges in some way. Like you mentioned, right after the day after we recorded that episode, I had mentioned in the episode that I was looking for a particular song. And this song was on a punk compilation CD that I got from this I didn't include in that episode, but I bought it at a really tiny record store up in Oakhurst where I went to high school, which is a small town above Fresno. This little record store was run by this guy who was a little bit older than me. He really led me down a really cool path of discovering new bands and bands that were emerging right at the moment, but also bands that were significant in the late 70s, early 80s, and establishing the hardcore punk movement and stuff. This is a funny aside. He and I had a radio show on an AM station up there in Oakhurst for about a year. And we would just play like old school punk and then some new stuff and weird things that I was finding. Like I would be the one to throw on like a song by Captain Beefheart, and he'd be the one to throw on a song by Black Flag. But it was a fun show. Like it was called the Brian and Ronnie Show. I don't know if I ever told you this, Mark. Did I tell you this?
No, I don't recall this, but
yeah.
My comment was clever title for a show.
Yeah, that's right. It's it's definitely a little less clever than Cambridge and with Sean, which I think Cambridge and with Sean is a pretty great and clever title, by the way. It's deep cut. I had a compilation CD, and I wasn't sure what it was called because I couldn't remember what it was called. And that's one of the things that my brain has done to me in the recent years is it's lost a lot of material from the past.
So skating accidents,
and God knows what else. The CD, I thought it was one of these punk compilations that were fairly popular, and I kept looking at those compilations and noticing they were all pretty much like new school punk, and that's really not. I've never been into new school punk. I guess it's not new school anymore. What would it just be called? Punk now? I was never a huge fan of NoFX and Green Day, and those bands showed up a lot on those later compilations. So I was trying to figure out what this one compilation was.
Have you mentioned the song yet?
I have not yet.
Okay.
The song...
You can keep it secret if that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do that. I start talking about something, movie, and I'm like, I never said the title of the movie I was talking about.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I thought it was a Husker Du song. Something in me, I'm 90% sure this is a Husker Du song. And then as I was listening to these compilations, I just could not find the Husker Du song that I was looking for. So I went through all of their catalog, what I thought was all of their catalog. And then I happened upon Faster and Louder Volume 2 on YouTube. That was sort of pushing a button for me. Like, that was maybe where I needed to be headed. I read that title and I was like, that I think is the title of the compilation. But it wasn't Volume 2. Finally, I decided to go on to Discogs. I don't know why it took me so long to figure out that, because I could not find Faster and Louder Volume 1 anywhere else until I went to Discogs. Found Discogs listing of Faster and Louder Volume 1, and sure enough, the name of the Husker Du song was a song called Statues, which was a single, came out on an EP, which makes sense why I wasn't able to find it when listening through their albums. So then I typed in Statues Husker Du on YouTube, immediately it popped up.
Are you different? Are you new? No, you're just a statue.
I was transported to that place. You know that feeling, right? You had the similar feeling with the rock ball. I spent a lot of time listening to that song, but also listening to the other songs on that record. So Dead Kennedys are on there, Bad Brains, Circle Jerks, Suicidal Tendencies, The Dicks, Angry Samoans, Meatmen, SSD, Red Cross, DOA, Really Red, The Stains, Government Issue, Mission of Burma, Husker Du, The Urinals, and Bobby Sox. And I listened to this album on constant repeat. It must have been my sophomore year of high school. The 3 songs, That's How I Escaped My Certain Fate by Mission of Burma, Statues, and I'm a Bug by the Urinals. I listened to those mostly. I don't know why I like those 3 songs, but they were grouped together on the CD toward the end. That, and of course, I love Dead Kennedys, so Holiday in Cambodia is one of my favorite songs. But that aside, Statues is an amazing song. I'm surprised that it's not part of their catalog because it was an EP or a single, and I guess only Husker Du fans really sort of appreciate it. But it's an epic song. It's simple. At the time, I was in a band in high school. It was one of my first bands called Leftovers, because we were all the outliers of the band community at my high school. So we were the leftover guys that weren't in other people's bands. And I tried so hard to convince these guys to play Statues. It was really simple. It was a really easy bass line for me to learn. And the lyrics were simple enough for me to remember, which was a big deal for me back then.
So this isn't a recent problem.
No, it's been around for a while. I was a drama nerd a little bit in high school, and I had a huge problem remembering lines. Part of it was that I just didn't care back then. Now it's just I have a hard time remembering things. But yeah, I tried to convince them to play it. We planned one concert, and they didn't want to play it. We did some other crappy songs, and it was not a great performance. I've heard from friends since then.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
They remember when you guys played? You sucked.
Yeah. I was in another band later on, and I saw a friend of mine from high school. We played in San Francisco, and they showed up to the concert, and they were like, this was so much better than what I saw you do in high school. And I was like, thank you for that honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since then, I've been listening to that song. I've been listening to Husker Du a lot more, Mission of Burma a lot more. But that song, it does something special for me, and I'm so happy to have found it. I am planning to get, next paycheck, I'm going to try and get Faster and Louder Volume 1, add it to my collection. There seem to be only a few copies out there. I'm anxious to snag one.
Interesting. You can't access that disc online.
You mean like to order it?
Well, to download that and put it on your phone.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I want to have the CD. I really want to have the CD.
If you have Apple Music, you could go get all the songs and create a compilation on your phone.
I know. I've already been listening to a little bit of that stuff on Apple Music. The truck that I drive around is a 2002. It doesn't have the capability to link up Wi-Fi,
Bluetooth
thingy. I want to get the CD so I can put it in the CD player. I also want to get the CD just so I can have the object, because I really do feel
That's
like
understandable.
albums are, whether they're vinyl or they're on CD, I just love the physical media. I love the little booklets. I love being able to. Do you hear the motorcycle out there?
No, your voice did something really bizarre. Anyway, sorry. Kind of scary.
That's for you folks, because this is October now when this airs, and
They won't hear it. I think it was just my earbuds, but anyway.
Oh, that's funny.
Have you contacted Raging Records to see if they have it in stock?
Oh, that's a good idea. I didn't even think about that.
You never know.
That's funny. I never think about those guys. They are in town.
And Tower Records. We have an area in Fresno called the Tower District, and that's what this record store is named for. It's not connected with the old Tower Records.
Right.
If that confuses anybody, we do not have a Tower Records here anymore.
No. And that first Tower Records that we had, that was over there near that movie theater that we used to show the art house films, that Tower Records was an epic tower. Like, it was a small space.
Tower Records ruled.
It ruled, right? I mean, they had like...
As did the video store.
Yeah.
2 doors down or whatever.
That's right. That was a great version of Tower Records.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
Did you have this on tape or CD back then?
It was one of the first. So I remember that year, my sophomore year of high school, I got a CD player for Christmas or my birthday or something. And I was really into the Doors. And I was really starting to get into punk rock and Sonic Youth. And Faster and Louder Volume 1 was one of the first 10 CDs that I bought. There was a couple of Doors albums and Faster and Louder.
We'll have to talk about the Doors sometime.
Oh my gosh, right? That was certainly an obsession I went through.
Better write that down.
I have mixed feelings about, because part of that was stemmed from the movie, which I
just wrote down Obsession instead of the Doors.
Dorbsession.
I'm glad I caught myself, because I would have looked at that and go, why did I write down Obsession?
I'm telling you, my problems are contagious, Mark. Be careful. That was one of the first CDs that I bought.
So what happened to it as the follow-up?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened to that CD. There were periods of time in my 20s and into my 30s where I made really dumb decisions based on monetary need of selling stuff off. I would take bunches of CDs to the record stores, sell them or trade them. My biggest regret is to this day selling off my entire comic book collection.
Well, yeah.
Which was...
We will get into that eventually.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Something that every kid goes through. Almost every kid.
Yeah. This is a little aside, but I went to Heroes Comics in town. That's where I sold my comics to. I went in there and I was looking for some really early Masters of the Universe comics that I had back then. I found deep in their archives a copy of one of them. I feel like it might be mine.
Hey,
that's I just had a feeling like some of the damage looked a little bit familiar to me.
You never can tell.
Never can tell. Now you can cue that song. Never Can Tell. Is that the name of that song?
I don't know. I'm going to write that down, though. I don't even know what song you're talking about.
The Pulp Fiction soundtrack.
Oh.
I can't remember it.
C'est la vie, c'est the old folks. It goes to show you never can tell.
For years, trying to find, literally from about the early 2000s up until a couple weeks ago, trying to find this song by Husker Du. Every once in a while it would pop up in my brain. Wouldn't be able to find it when searching whatever version of the internet throughout these last 20-something years. It's been a long journey, and it's a huge relief to have found it, and I have it written. Just dropped my earpod. I have it written down now, so I won't ever forget it again.
You have it written? Well,
yeah.
You can go back and listen to this episode if you need to.
Yes, thank goodness for this.
It is that one. It's not even really that one thing, because you didn't have any new search terms. You were still looking for the same thing, possibly a Husker Du song from some punk compilation. And why it shook loose this time, who knows?
It's so weird, right?
And my story is similar. Same with the plastic rock ball. Same with a couple other things. I think I cut that out of the bonus episode when I mentioned, I have like 4 or 5 things that I have discovered, thought about, and then discovered. Still had a couple that I hadn't. It's really odd how sometimes it's by total chance, and then sometimes it's just looking maybe a little deeper somewhere to the left instead of to the right. That's kind of what happened with that Saturday Night Live coffee book for me, which I had looked for and had found, multiple times. I just didn't think that it was that Rolling Stone book. It was. Yeah. Or sometimes you have no idea and randomly will see something on the internet. Yeah. Which is what happened with 2 of the other things that I discovered or refound that we'll talk about eventually.
The term you used was shaking it loose. I feel like that's probably the most appropriate term for this, because you can shake the tree 10 times, and in our case, probably hundreds of times. But you shake it that one extra time, you do it a different way.
Or it's a different tree.
Or if it's a different tree. And I don't know why I never thought of Discogs. Why didn't I ever think of Discogs? To me, that's perplexing. My brain should have known that. I'm aware of Discogs.
I wouldn't have thought of that because music for me is a different kind of thing. Yeah. Like I have the things that I like that I've liked for 45 years. Yeah, yeah. For me, it's more like I forget about those songs and then I hear them again, and then you're in a car or something. Yeah. Especially in the old days when you were just listening to the radio. And so you're waiting for the DJ to come on and say, that was blah, blah, blah by the Hoo Hoo Hoos. Even if that happens, you forget about it when you get home.
Yeah, totally.
So nowadays, we're watching movies or we're watching a TV show, and a song will come on that I remember really liking. And so I Shazam it.
Shazam!
Shazam holds on to that. And then I can go get on the computer, get on Apple Music, browse for that. And if they have it, there it is. It's on my phone now. I did that with a Ministry song that I didn't even know was a Ministry song that I had taped off of the radio back in the 80s. Yes. I've never listened to Ministry in my life, but for some reason, this song must have been pretty popular at the time. And I remember having heard it, and when the song would come on, I would like rush to put the tape in and hit record. Yeah. And so it was on a compilation that had all kinds of weird stuff on it. I think we heard it in the car, in Carlita's car on Sirius XM. So I could look, go, oh, that's this. I don't even remember the title of the song by Ministry. When I got home, I put it on my phone.
God, that's so cool.
It has to be brought back to my attention for me to remember. I couldn't go, oh yeah, I had this punk song or this tape from the early 90s or 80s or whatever. Yeah. It's got to come back into my brain, and then these days I can capture it a lot better and find it and have it.
What's really difficult, like with your plastic rock ball, what's really difficult is when you have an idea of something, but you can't quite, it's like a dream state. Yep. You know how those dreams where you want to punch somebody, but you can't, your arms don't work. Yeah, exactly. You want to say something, but you can't get the words out. Then I wake up in the middle of the night and say the word, and my wife's like, what? What's going on with you?
For me, it's always kicking a soccer ball. I don't know why. Yeah. An anxious thing where like I gotta kick the ball.
And you can't quite do it.
I can't do it.
That rock ball thing, it's so clear now that you have it in your hand, right? Now that you can hold that ball and you found the appropriate terminology to search for it online, it's that revelatory moment where you're like, this is it. I found it. But up until then, you're in that dream state. I knew there was a cool bass line in it. I knew that the song started with a bass line, but how many Husker Du songs start with a bass line? Well, now I know it's about 5. I knew it was a repeated bass line, just like you knew it was a lumpy ball, but is it rubber? Is it hollow? Is the song an early Husker Du song? Is the song a later Husker Du song? It's all anomalous until it just clicks. And you shake that new tree or that old tree or whatever, and it finally pops out, and there it is and reveals itself. It's such a cool feeling. I hope that other people You and I are you and I are obsessives.
Obsess much.
I kind of love that. I love that part of my personality because it allows me hours and hours of interesting journeys. And I wonder if there are people out there that are not that way.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of moments do they have where they're like, yes, that feels so good to discover that or learn that? And I hope that they do in some way.
I know there are people that aren't. Like
yeah,
us.
it's true.
One of us.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to this, you're probably one of us.
There's a lot of guys our age who are, but yeah, it's kind of like that thing, just finding out about people that, people that don't have internal monologues.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of them. And then there's other people that can't picture things.
Yeah, it's a really strange...
And I'm thinking, wow, I can't even imagine not being able to do that. So
just the fact that you said I can't even imagine is kind of a joke on turning that into a...
Visualize, I think, is the term.
Yeah.
You can't visualize an apple. You just know what an apple is. Or something to that effect. And it's like, what?
What a fascinating condition.
Apparently, it's not that uncommon, so...
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for the internet. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that has helped me solve a number of these mysteries.
Yeah.
Just out of the blue. We'll get to those. I won't talk about them again. But eventually, I have those on my list for a hopefully theme episode. If you have any of those other things, otherwise I'll just bring them up on different episodes. If you have more statues by Husker Du stories.
I'm sure I do. But of course I can't think of them right now because they're buried in the dream world.
Yeah, there's always something to obsess about.
Yeah.
Obsess much.
I'm excited to talk about my second thing because that's another thing too. What's on your list, Mark? You've kept this from me a little bit.
Yeah, I like to be secretive.
Yeah.
Man, my throat is really bad today. Sorry, people. If anybody listens to Wake Up Heavy, they're used to me having a scratchy voice. But
well, the air has been really bad here in the valley.
I think that's part of it. And the windows are open.
Yep.
Along with the 40-something-year-old mystery items. Yeah. This was one that you shook loose because of this Husker Du story, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give this another go. The overarching, is it arcing or arching? Overarching,
I think.
Yeah, okay. The overarching obsession that this belongs to is the Beatles, which was a pretty big one for a lot of years. Still one of my all-time favorite bands.
Absolutely.
So that started in 1980 when John Lennon was murdered. I think like you, when I get into something, I really get into something. Not necessarily every single thing becomes a major obsession, but if I really get into something, then I want to learn about it as much as possible. That usually involves finding books on the subject.
Yeah.
Especially back then in the early 80s, I wasn't going to be able to go to a video store maybe and locate videos to watch on a subject, or look something up on the internet, or look something up on Xfinity where I can type in the search term and see if something pops up. It's books and the source material, the material of the thing that you're obsessed with. So in this case, it would be albums for the Beatles. But I had 2 or 3 different books. This one in particular is one that I remember poring over constantly, just like that SNL book. A lot of the pictures from that book I recall as being unique, like I wouldn't see them other places. So again, this is a coffee table book that came out in the 70s. I don't know what it is about 1970s coffee table books, but apparently I had a number of them. Alien, I've already talked about.
Yeah.
Pink Floyd, The Walls, coffee table size book. SNL. Yeah. And then this one on the Beatles.
Hey, you know what would make a great coffee table book? A coffee table book about coffee tables. Get it?
As per usual, over the years, I have searched for 70s Beatles coffee table book. I don't know what other term to use instead of coffee table, like what oversized books, what the proper term is.
I think
Folio,
oversized books, actually.
Oversized.
Folio, yeah.
So I always use coffee table book because of that Seinfeld episode.
Yeah.
Or storyline. When you type something that vague in, you get all these different books. And I knew that none of the ones that I would see were it. And I thought, I don't know how to narrow this down because I don't remember the title, just like you with the Husker Du song. I wouldn't have any idea who the author was. I just know it was an oversized book, paperback, about the Beatles. So that day after you found out what the song was you were looking for, went ahead, typed in that common search term again, and just kept getting the complete Beatles and the new Get Back.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Companion piece to that whole thing. Looking, nothing's catching my eye. I'm not sure what possessed me to do this, but I started seeing auction listings for collections of music books in general and Beatles books in particular, and it was just the spines. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start looking here and see if a title catches my eye. So I clicked on a couple of the images. I'm like, Beatles from A to Z. No, that doesn't ring a bell. I know it's not the complete Beatles. I know what that is, and it's not that. Definitely not the new Get Back thing. It's not a lyric book, which a lot of them were, or a sheet music collection of their songs. It's none of that. I know that. Kind of like you've mentioned with eBay, when you click on something down below, others bought these items, or other customers liked this. And so I would click on something and then look to the side and below that item and see another stack of spines. So I clicked on a couple of those, was reading through the titles, dismissing them, finally clicked on one, looking through the titles, and I see Growing Up with the Beatles. And that immediately set me spinning because I thought, hold on. Literally, my brain stopped in its tracks for me and said, the book that you had wasn't just a Beatles biography. It was the author's biography about his time growing up with the Beatles.
Yeah.
So I immediately put that title in the search bar and clicked it. The whole page was just the cover of this book. Immediate recognition with the picture on the book. Let me grab it real quick. And I say that because it's an odd picture that I have never seen replicated anywhere else. Of them younger. This is probably 64.
Yep.
In these red and white check, like gingham button-down shirts, all with black ties, holding roses. That is such an odd picture of them. Who knows how many thousands of pictures they took for the magazines, the fan magazines and all that.
Cover's kind of all over the place because the font choices are strange, and like the is a little bit intense.
The in the middle there is weird. The Beatles name itself sort of replicates what was on the drum set.
Right.
There's tons of copies available on used book sites, ebooks, and so I went to eBay, found one for $3.99.
Nice.
Got it. It's a decent copy. There's some scuffs on it. That kind of stuff I'm not worried. It just adds to the pedigree of the book.
For sure.
Got it pretty quickly, opened it up, and a couple things fell out of it.
Oh.
There's 3 little notepad sheets.
Interesting.
And one of them has album titles, Hard Day's Night, Help, all the way down to Rock and Roll. And it's interesting, these titles, because a lot of these are the U.S. title. Well, obviously they're the U.S. titles for the albums, but something like Rock and Roll, which is an album I had, was a later 70s compilation of hard rock Beatles songs.
Right.
Abbey Road, another one that I had, is basically a compilation of singles.
Mark meant Hey Jude, the compilation album, not Abbey Road, the studio album.
Late singles from like 68 on, Meet the Beatles. Well, that's an actual album. They noted some Kansas City Times, Kansas City Times, Ursula K. Le Guin. That's interesting. I mean, he must.
Oh, wow.
Sci-fi, and then the 1975 Life magazine, which I think was a pretty famous issue. There was a poster in here. I think it's Led Zeppelin. That looks like Robert Plant from Bananas magazine. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember Bananas.
So I got somebody's, well-loved copy with their notes and.
Oh, that's so cool.
Not mine, though, because I don't remember writing anything about the Kansas City Times. I would have made a list of albums to get.
You didn't have a Zeppelin obsession?
No.
Collecting posters?
Yeah, I would have never had a Led Zeppelin poster from Bananas magazine. But it's kind of interesting. I'll talk more about the book when I talk about the Beatles' obsession. Paging through it, finding some of these weird pictures that I've never seen anybody else. There's a couple of Paul, particularly from Magical Mystery Tour, that I've never seen anywhere else. And it's interesting because the kid was 11 going on 12 when he first heard them in 1964. And I was 11 going on 12 when my Beatles obsession started. And I can see sort of the parallels of how I listened to them over the years with the book and just kind of going chronologically through their discography.
Yeah.
I'm going to probably read the book before I use that as a topic. It's really weird how that thought process worked to finally track this thing down. Like, okay, start looking at the spines, see if something grabs you. Something did and made my brain just like instantly kick in.
Yeah.
And then that cover was just, I wouldn't have had any, I didn't remember the cover until I saw it.
Right.
Remembering that I always thought it was an odd picture. Even back then, I thought it was an odd picture to use for them, or of them. Luckily, though, that was, way, way, way down deep in there. So that when I did see it, it just immediately was like, yeah, that's that weird picture they used that I have never seen anywhere else.
That's so similar, to go back to Husker Du real quick, but it's so similar to when I saw the name of the song on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, that's it. I knew it was a one-word title. I knew, but my brain, thank goodness, it's not completely shot. It's like, yes, that is the song. That's it. So you had that moment with the cover of the book. That's so cool.
Well, and even with the title, though, because I didn't remember that it was that mix of he's telling his story from 64 to 76, basically. So there's some post-Beatles stuff in there as well. He's telling his story along with, album releases, single releases, and that kind of maybe not being as interested in the band anymore and then becoming interested again when Sgt. Pepper comes out and blah, blah, blah. I didn't remember that aspect of the book at all. And it got me to thinking of another book that I had that was a trivia book, which I still haven't found, but I think I'm close. And then as I was searching on eBay, it actually brought up a book that I totally forgot that I had. But once I saw the cover, I was like, oh, I had that paperback too. I'll save all that stuff for when we talk about the Beatles, or when I talk about the Beatles.
I have a question for you. When you were leafing through the book, when you got it in the mail, leafing through it, did that experience come back to you too? Or was it just the cover? Yeah.
No, seeing those pictures, those weird pictures, particularly for Magical Mystery Tour, I don't know why those always struck me as odd. Definitely did. And there's a couple of racy pictures in there. There's one of when John met Yoko and something from one of her art exhibits, and there's a girl with no pants on. You can see her butt.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, I remember going back and looking at that picture all the time.
That was my favorite picture.
And then there was another one of a girl holding Beatles dolls. I think they're stuffed. And she doesn't have a top on, so you can see a little bit of underboob.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember going back and looking at that picture quite often.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was exactly the same as looking through that Saturday Night Live book. Like, I remember that picture. I remember this page layout. Weird. And then some pages I don't recall at all. Like,
it's fascinating.
When the memories are strong, they're very strong.
Yeah, I had the same experience with this book of horses that my aunt used to have. I used to look at it compulsively, and then I ran across it at a used bookstore about 10 years ago or something. Ran across that same book, and it just clicked. Leafing through it, it was like every image. I wasn't interested in buying it for myself just to have it, because I'm not huge into horses. But when I would look at those images as a kid, I was like, wow, that's it really made an impression. So I was hoping you would have something similar to that with the images in this book.
Oh yeah. The strong memories definitely hit when I see those pages. So this was the question. I think I mentioned this pre-recording about bookstores in town.
Oh, yeah.
And wondering back then, other than the, what did we say, B. Dalton that was in Fashion Fair?
B. Dalton in Fashion Fair, Walden Books in Manchester Center.
But even before then, do you remember the Upstart Crow in Manchester?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that's where I got a lot of these pre-B. Dalton.
My relationship with Upstart Crow was only hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, too, because my family frequented Manchester because it was close to our house.
I mean, it predates Fashion Fair by a number of years. So that is where we used to go.
Yeah. So I think maybe I was too young, but I've had several family members and friends say, remember Upstart Crow? And I think when you and I, this is a whole other episode of discussion, but you and I worked at Walden Books together. And I think that's when you first mentioned Upstart Crow to me. I never had the experience of going there to shop, but I kind of wish that I had.
Yeah, there's a couple of books that I know I got there, and I'm just curious if this is one of them. But it was really cool. It was all like wood paneled and cozy. And
that's awesome.
We didn't go there a ton, because I think I did most of my book reading at the library, at the Sunnyside branch of the library. But once around this time in the early 80s, when I started getting stuff for myself or asking for stuff, I think it was a lot of Upstart Crow shopping. And then mid 80s and later, it would have been B. Dalton in the mall and Fashion Fair. It's one of those things that comes up on that Lost Fresno, and I always forget about it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that was a really cool place.
It's a great name for a store, and much more interesting than Walden Books or B. Dalton.
Well, any of the ones that are just named after some dude.
Yeah.
B. Dalton, Walden, Barnes & Noble.
That's great.
That was cool. And then I think that's where the Red Robin that was in that mall pretty much took over its space.
Oh, wow. It had that big space?
I think they expanded into another shop as well, but it was in that area where Red Robin was.
That's cool. According to LondonTheatreDirect.com, Upstart Crow was used by a critique of Shakespeare by Robert Greene. Upstart Crow was used to denote Shakespeare's upward mobility.
I knew it was Shakespeare related, but I figured it was probably just a line.
It says here, Robert Greene believed Shakespeare's bombastic writing was unequal to the works of the literary greats. Which it's hilarious because I kind of feel that way about Shakespeare, but it must have been interesting.
But who are we still talking about today? He's still being read in every college, high school in the nation.
There's worldwide. A reason why, right? Like, because this guy was willing to take a risk and push language, and that's why we're still talking about him. But apparently, it would have been interesting to be around at the time because I could see why more conservative critics or more conservative creatives might be like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is?
Who's that guy in the coat think he is anyways? Bo Diddley?
Upstart Crow. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool name.
So the next thing on my list... Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, what's next on your list?
Sort of piggybacks off of the Beatles in a dark way because 1980 was the year that this movie came out. 1980 was the year that John Lennon was killed. This movie in many ways sort of marks the beginning of a pretty bleak era for us. In rewatching it recently, resonates with our current state of things in a lot of ways. But I don't want to get too deep with this, but the main reason why I chose The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, not The Shining novel by Stephen King, but the movie The Shining by Stanley Kubrick as my other obsession. Two reasons why. One is our family thought, or I kind of directed us toward this, starting the Halloween or the fall season with this movie. I was really excited about that. Neither of our daughters had seen The Shining before, and we've been sort of waiting for the right time to show it to them. And so we chose this year. And The Shining for me, and I know it is for many people, sort of a landmark moment as far as watching movies goes. I remember, I didn't see it when it came out, obviously, but when my dad brought home like the first VHS copy of it, and we watched it on our little TV, I remember feeling like I was part of something totally different from any film I'd ever seen before. I'd never had that experience until that moment where I felt like a movie was activating in me a sense of, this is going to sound weird, like aesthetic glee. Like I felt like there was something happening in that Wendy Carlos music at the beginning. The mountainscapes and the ominous, the foreboding, but you don't really know how to feel about this. Jack Nicholson's, later on as I was watching, had Jack Nicholson's performance elevated into this sort of manic, weird thing. All the symmetry, the sound of the big wheel over the carpet, and then the carpet and the tile, and the carpet and the tile, and the carpet and the wood floors, and the carpet. As a kid, as a young person watching this movie for the first time on a tiny screen, I felt like I was part of something bigger. That movies didn't have to just be entertainment, movies could be art. I hadn't really had that feeling before until seeing that movie. And it sort of marked an interesting era for me as a young person. And my relationship with my dad, he would then like bring home Eraserhead and...
Just cut them up like regular chickens? Sure, just cut them up like regular chickens.
Other oddball movies that it was like, oh, little Ronnie likes this weird stuff, so maybe I'll just sort of expose him to all the weird stuff.
El Topo at 8 years
old. El Topo, right?
Yeah.
Thank goodness I didn't see that until later on. But my dad did have a movie. You and I have talked a book called Midnight Movies. He had that book. I would leaf through it and I'd see images of El Topo and I'd see images of all these things.
I have a different Midnight Movies book, but it's about the same movies. I believe there are two different books about the same thing called the same thing, but they are by different authors.
Yeah.
Because I know the book you're talking about, and I know the one I have, and I'm pretty sure they're different.
That's interesting. Maybe they're different editions, or
I don't think
expanded edition versus...
Because I've looked it up before, and I know that there are two competing books called the same thing.
Yeah, that book was like my dad's version of that book. I would return to that and leaf through those pages. I didn't understand half of what I was looking at. I knew that these would be interesting movies to see. But The Shining was sort of a remarkable moment for me as a kid. Like, movies could do something bigger in watching this. But also it marked the beginning of my obsession with Jack Nicholson, which I've already talked about when we talked about Batman 1989. I think it's the movie I've returned to the most, that I've probably watched the most in my life. And it's interesting because I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie of all time, because that fluctuates, but it's definitely up there. It's the perfect movie for this season. Watching it again recently made me realize that, unfortunately, and I don't want to get down here a little bit or political or anything, but I'll try to keep it vague, but unfortunately, the themes in that novel, in that book, in that movie, sorry. The themes in that movie are relevant now, are still relevant.
I don't think they will ever be irrelevant, unfortunately.
It's really too bad. So doing a little research, I was seeing why Stephen King didn't really like the Stanley Kubrick version, and part of that is that Stephen King, at the end of the novel, if I remember correctly, Jack sort of redeems himself by burning the hotel down.
Right.
And to me, I feel like maybe the movie is more important because it doesn't take that turn. As you just said, that perhaps this problem cannot be resolved or won't be completely resolved, and that toxic masculinity will always sort of be an issue. And that the most haunting aspect of that film is that even though Jack is dead, he's still around. His spirit is still not just in the Overlook, but like everywhere. I thought that was a really interesting thing to sort of rediscover in watching it now as a 47-year-old guy in this current era that we're living in.
And the other issues that King had were with the depictions by Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall of those characters. And he saw them differently, and they are different in the book. But I think a lot of the critique of Jack Nicholson is that, oh, well, you know he's crazy from the beginning, but it's like, that's just because you've seen him act crazy in other movies.
I think you're right there.
And when you have a 300 and something page book, you can take a lot longer to get him up to that level in a 2+ hour movie, even though it is longer than most horror movies. You got to get to it quicker.
Yeah.
He kind of can't help how his eyebrows are, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I prefer, though, about the Shelley Duvall character is that, and his critique is that she's way too weak for way too long. He saw Wendy as more not standing up to, because she goes through a lot in the book as well, a lot of abuse and things. But I again think that it hits a little bit harder in the movie because you don't think that this woman can stand up for herself. She keeps her and Danny alive.
Yeah.
And so that turn for me means a bit more in the movie.
Yeah. In the film, it's kind of an unexpected turn because it's really smartly done. There are hints at her strength, even from the very beginning.
Right.
But it's not overt. And then at the end, she's driving that snowcat off the premises with no hesitation. I did read up a little bit on this about Stephen King's interpretation of Wendy in the movie as being weak. If the strength is too overt, then you're not scared for the potential success of the outcome.
You have to be worried about her.
You have to be worried about her and Danny. And both her and Danny are, despite being in a tumultuous situation, are essentially holding their own throughout the entire film. Wendy has sort of a Shelley Duvall Wendy is so hopeful that shit's not going to get weird, all the way up until the moment where shit starts getting weird. And that kind of seems very realistic to me, that a person would be like in denial right up to the point where they can't be in denial anymore. And how that's a breakdown for her. Like, she breaks down because of that.
I have another theory. I don't know if I posited this on my Stephen King series when I talk about the book and the movie. So many of King's characters are loose versions of him. They're almost all teachers struggling to be writers. I mean, I don't know how many of his lead characters are that person. And if anybody knows anything about King, he was an alcoholic for a number of years and was not nice to his family during that time. If I'm not mistaken, he did something similar to his son Joe as a child. You know, the whole arm wrenching thing. So I think he still sees Jack as a substitute for himself, and that may color why he didn't like that the character wasn't redeemed. Yeah. It's almost a personal affront. This is total conjecture on my part, but I could see that being something like, hey, you didn't give him a out in the end to be not seen as a total villain.
Even though it's conjecture, I think it's pretty... You might be hitting the nail on the head, because the miniseries that came out on TV that Stephen King produced, it follows the book more closely. It shows that redemption at the end. Sometimes telling a hard truth, sometimes we need to leave it open-ended. You can tell the story of an alcoholic and have it end at AA and everything's better. To tell the story of an alcoholic, to leave out the AA and the everything is better at the end, still tells the Grimm's fairy tales version of it, which is, this is the part of a person that you need to be aware of, dear reader, and watch out. And that's to me what The Shining does, is the film The Shining does, as opposed to the novel. But The main reason why I wanted to bring it up was because of the aesthetics of that movie. The clothing, the cinematography, the music, the interiors. It's the reason why the movie There Will Be Blood is one of my favorite movies also. There Will Be Blood can't exist without The Shining. When I saw There Will Be Blood in the theater, I was like, this is so good. Why is it so good? And then rewatching The Shining, I was like, oh yeah, that's why. There's so many nods to The Shining in that.
I still have a hard time. The first time I found out that all of the interiors of the Overlook were sets, it still kind of boggles my mind because they're just so massive. I
don't really know why a person... I know why Kubrick did it because of the lighting and wanted to create a particular kind of mood. And if you shoot in a hotel that's already there, you don't really have so much control.
Well, he wanted to stay in England. And really, that's what it comes down to.
Is that what it comes down to?
Yeah, he's not going to... He didn't come back to the States to film anything once he was there, which was started in, I think, for 2001.
Yeah.
He never came back.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why, even in Eyes Wide Shut, why Tom Cruise is walking in New York, but he's walking on
a fake New York
thing with rear projection.
Yeah.
He's not in New York.
I think that's fascinating. And I think it adds to the magic of what we're looking at on the screen because everything is controlled. And I can see why that would be beneficial, just lighting alone.
But look up how they did the overhead shot, if you don't know already, of the maze. And it'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
Because it's perfect. And this is pre-computer graphics.
Proof that you can make a movie without any of that and still have it be terrifying. I talked briefly with our youngest at the end of watching it last night, and she was saying, I thought it would be scarier. And I was like, yeah, you're right. If we're talking about jump scares and what we're used to seeing now in horror movies and how the psychological terror of that movie, just the tension building is something that is missing from a lot of newer films, even missing from Halloween, which I think was the same year, right? Wasn't the first Halloween
2 years earlier?
2 years later?
Earlier.
Oh, earlier. That's right. It accomplishes a kind of terror, but it also accomplishes a kind of beauty. I could just listen to that movie and feel inspired by the types of sounds that the movie produces. Edit out all of Jack Nicholson's dialogue. Edit out all the dialogue and just listen to the sounds of that film. It's really beautiful. Edit out all the scenes with people and just look at the sets and look at the photography. It's art, it's beautiful. And as a kid, I knew something about that. And for some reason, it really struck an important chord for me and I was obsessed with it. Pile that on with my obsession with Jack Nicholson and watching Going South and every going back all the way to his Roger Corman movies and really doing a deep dive with him. The Shining sort of started all that, reinforced by Tim Burton's Batman. It's a good way to start the Halloween season.
We showed it to Cleo, or I showed it to Cleo a couple years ago, maybe for the first time. It creeped her out. It must have been at least a couple years ago because she was still getting kind of spooked by stuff. I think it was mainly the bathroom scene because it isn't that scary. I think it's one that if you didn't see it when you were, I'm not talking about when it came out or anything, but if you didn't see it when you were too young to really see it, or you shouldn't have seen it, it may not have. Because I remember being scared by it when I saw it. I don't know if it was on TV first. Probably was on TV first. I remember it scaring me. I wouldn't describe it these days as a scary movie either, but those damn twins, man. Freaked me out. Freaked me out. They don't look right. I hate to say that, but they don't look right. Their faces don't look right. And part of it's lighting and stuff like that, I know, but they have odd faces. And it was creepy to me anytime they showed up in that movie. And it's a overall feeling of dread more than he wasn't interested in doing a scary movie necessarily and didn't really know the tools that were being employed for the typical slashers and things like that. Just a couple months ago, I was like, I've been having a feeling I need to watch The Shining again. You want to? Should I watch it without your... No, let's watch it.
Mm-hmm.
It works for her. And then we watch Dr. Sleep.
I still haven't seen Dr. Sleep yet.
And it carries those themes, though, that you're talking about of Jack still being there everywhere, because that's what Danny struggles through.
Yeah.
The whole movie is that shadow of his father.
The shadow of the father. That's just the human... I feel like a huge part of just the human dilemma in general, the shadow of the father.
Yeah.
I understand where Stephen King is coming from, but I prefer the way The Shining pulls that story to a close.
The movie.
Yeah, the movie. Yeah, sorry. The movie The Shining pulls that story to a close, which is not a close. It's not. There's no closure. There's just, this is the deal, folks. Be aware of it.
I don't know if you remember this when we talked about Suspiria years ago on on Wake Up Heavy. I asked you, like I ask everybody that guests on there, when did you see this first? And you mentioned it was at the Satellite Union at Fresno State, which I was there for too. Did you see this one when they showed it at the Satellite Union?
Yeah, I think we went.
But do you remember what happened?
Didn't it break down or something and not...
It was in the reel. I don't think it was backwards, but it was reversed.
Oh,
it was
that's right.
It was either upside down and reversed or backwards and reversed.
Yes.
So it was actually, it was so disorienting because it's like, wait a minute, film runs backwards. You can kind of, I mean, everything's still positioned correctly.
That's right.
And you go, oh, this is running backwards. But it wasn't that. It was like flipped. It had been wound the last time whoever it shone. I don't even know how you managed to do that. But it was flipped the wrong way. And
That's
like,
right.
What? So we didn't end up seeing it because they couldn't fix it quickly enough.
That's right. I remember that now.
And I was really pissed off.
I remember that too. I think I remember that more than actually what really happened.
Well, I mean, you know, what, $2 or something? Probably go see it at the Satellite Union.
That's right. But, you know, you go see a movie like that on the big screen, you want it to be a good experience. There's nothing like watching that movie on the big screen. Let me rephrase it. I imagine there's nothing like watching that on the big screen because I still haven't seen it on the big screen.
And you missed your chance a couple of years ago because it played again.
Oh, really?
I think my nephew went and saw it.
Oh.
Yeah, it played here.
I'm sure it'll happen again. This is airing in October. I thought it's a good way to sort of launch into the season with that obsession of mine.
Yeah, and I didn't pick a spooky theme because I have a whole show devoted to horror movies, so you can just go listen to that on weirdnewaymedia.com.
That's right, Wake Up Heavy.
Look for Wake Up Heavy. Now, I'm sure at some point I will get into that because it was and is an obsession of mine. Horror movies in general.
It'd be interesting to hear you talk about your relationship to horror, just sort of in general, like a little overview of how it began and what are the markers, like what are the marks on the map for you that will always be there.
Again, most of that is on Wake Up Heavy.
That's right, folks. Go back and listen.
Yeah, maybe next year for the October show, we'll actually do a full-on theme.
Yeah.
Of spooky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of talked about a few spooky things like the monster movie book and makeup kit and things like that.
We'll always return to that because that's something that drives the both of us.
Very true. Hello, this is Mark Begley, the host of Wake Up Heavy, and I'd like to invite you to listen to my show over on weirdnewaymedia.com. Wake Up Heavy is a show about my horror movie obsessions from childhood, as well as new-to-me discoveries from the past and present. My guests have included fellow Weirding Way Media hosts Mike White from the Projection Booth podcast, Chris Tashu from the Culture Cast, Heather Drain from Noise Junkies, as well as Sam Deegan, Sam Panico, and Simon Fitzjohn. Every once in a while, my daughter Cleo even joins me.
Hey, that's me.
Find Wake Up Heavy and my other show, Cambridge and with Sean, on weirdingwaymedia.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget,
anything can happen when you wake up heavy.
So what's next on your list?
Well, I don't have a new item to talk about. I am continuing my One Plastic Rock Balls saga because some more things popped up. out of the ether, out of the zeitgeist.
Looks like a rock, acts like a ball.
And I think on that bonus episode, I said, the whole thing of this is, when is another one going to roll around? Another 20 years I got to wait?
Yeah.
When I'm 70 something?
Right.
Well, I didn't have to wait another 20 years. I only had to wait about a couple of weeks. We recorded that bonus episode and I put it out pretty quickly a couple days later. I think the next week, sometime, well, let me see. It was on August 24th, so not quite 2 weeks later, sitting on my couch, scrolling through Facebook. It's about all I do on Facebook these days is look at my feed and see if anything interesting pops up. A post from that vintage action figure and toy page popped up, and it was a group of pictures of 14 of these plastic rock balls.
Wow.
And I thought, what in the world? The gal was asking, can anyone help me identify these? I got them in a large lot of cereal premiums. I went to respond, saw that some people had already replied. One person that had replied to that previous one posted the same commercial.
Get a rock ball free, get a free rock ball.
People keep going back to that commercial even though it's the incorrect version. Still the same idea. And then a couple of people chimed in and I was like, man, I'm shooting my shot. So I mentioned, oh yeah, it's this. And I had one as a kid and I've been trying to track them down. If you're selling any, please let me know. A couple other people did the same thing. And I finally saw a response from the gal saying, I'm not selling them right now. Just trying to sort through this whole lot of premiums, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. I'm going to keep checking eBay.
Yeah.
Because if she sells them, that's most likely where they're going. So I think the next day, use my saved search terms, and up popped 2 different auctions from the same seller. One for the blue version and one for the gray version. And the blue version they were selling multiples of. And I ignored it because that's the one that I had gotten and talked about on that bonus episode. And these were buy it now auctions, which made me happy.
Yeah.
But the price was a little high still. So I went ahead and made an offer. Offer got accepted. My money was withdrawn immediately. It got shipped. And I think on that same day, on this other gal's post on that Facebook page, a guy had chimed in. Coincidentally, I got these in a large cereal premium lot, and it was the bouncy version. So now I had a picture of the bouncy version to look at, and they are different sculpts, completely different textures. And when I saw that, I kind of thought, and I don't think I mentioned this to you, but I was like, you know what? I may have had one of those too, because it was striking a lot of receptors in my brain.
Right.
And it just wasn't as interesting to me as a kid if I did have one, because it's definitely not the one that I've thought about for 40 something years.
Right.
It did look familiar. So then I'm thinking, okay, did the same thing. Hey, well, actually I DM'd him on Facebook. I'm like, I'm not posting on this thread anymore. Said, apologies if this is uncool to send something out of the blue, but if you're selling any of those bouncy balls, I'd be interested. He didn't respond. So anyway, back to the eBay listings, I saved them and kept looking and waiting to see if I could figure out if this was the same gal who just the day before had said she wasn't going to be selling them right away. And I felt like no, because it happened so quickly. But as time went on and one more auction of hers came up for a set of the 3. So you would get a blue one, the gray one, and the brown one as a
full
set.
Yeah.
Buy it now. I was thinking, man, this is a really big coincidence for this person on eBay to have multiples, obviously, of the blue one. I believe I got the only gray one that was up as a solo auction. And now we've got another set with a blue one, another gray one, and the brown one. And in this picture from Facebook, the gal had 10 blue ones, 3 gray ones, and only 1 brown one. And in the listing, it said, this is the only set I will be selling because there is only 1 brown available, or this is the only way to get a brown one, or something to that effect. And I thought, this is really coincidental. And I think I mentioned to you, I'm like, now I'm not so convinced that it's not the same person.
Yeah.
At some point, some knucklehead posted the closed auction that I had won previously to let this person know, like, this is how much you can get for these.
Oh.
I'm like, oh yeah, you can look for ended auctions, closed auctions, sold. So I did that and discovered that sometime in July, 2 of the bouncy ball versions sold. And I was like, that's after I was searching for these with correct terms. So how did that slip by me? It's weird how this all popped up. Now, would I have seen any of this without, for one thing, I wouldn't have seen her post if I hadn't joined that group, which I joined because of Jeff cluing me in on the other post on there. But if I had just kept searching after I mentioned it on that episode, would I have come across not only the auction that I won early on, but these listings for hers? I almost feel like I probably would have. Because if I type in Flintstones plastic rock ball or rubber rock ball, these pop up. So I'm kind of ticked off now that I went through that stupid auction process. If I had waited barely a month, I would have had all these options to buy it now.
Yeah, but how would you know that, right? Like, you can't know that. I mean, and also, it's really strange that suddenly this stuff is showing up.
Multiples.
Everywhere right now. Now that you've, if we want to get mystical, maybe we wouldn't be in this era if you hadn't experienced or gone through that successful auction and gotten that first one. Like, maybe everything's lining up on purpose in this way. As a collector of this, you're at a stage where you never thought you would be, which is, okay, I could potentially have every rubber version, every plastic version. And if I want to complete this collection and end the obsession with these things I can have on my shelf now, I can. Not only that, and you and I have already texted about this a little bit, not only that, but you can potentially get the best versions of these. First one, maybe you'll resell it or whatever if you get a better version of it. Or something along those lines.
Or maybe I'll hoard them.
Or maybe you'll hoard them, which after all these years, why wouldn't you, right? I mean, that's like...
Well, I'm not buying new things off the shelf to hoard.
Exactly.
They are on the secondary market. They are fair game.
That's right. 100%. I talk to Masters of the Universe collectors often. One of the big things is, how can we complain when suddenly out of the blue, all this stuff is now available? The complaints come from probably quality, or some things are hard to get. And that's how it is when you like something or when you're interested in something. But when you have so many options suddenly available to you, it's like, thank goodness.
I've experienced that with the whole Mego thing, which we'll talk about at some point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
As I'm continuing to search, another auction came up from a different person for the same blue ball. It's in rougher shape. Decent price, though. Buy it now. I think it just recently sold. So that was another person.
Yeah.
It could be that a lot of these you miss because they are buy it now auctions, and you don't look at ended listings.
Right.
Because I know I've had these terms for a while. And I think even the terms that I used prior to the original shaking loose of this thing would have worked for these. 2 different people, 3 different people on eBay, 4 different if I count the one that I won, within the last couple of months selling these items, which I have never seen before in 20 odd years of looking from time to time.
Yeah.
And then somebody with 14 of them at once, someone with 8 of the rubber ones all at once. It's just bizarre. I got the gray one. This is the one that got held up, I think, at Burning Man. I think it got stuck in the sludge.
Yeah.
There. I don't know. It was like, what happened?
Probably.
Typical Begley mailing delay. I've held the other ones from this seller on my watch list and saw the price go down.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, interesting. I think on all of these ones that I saved or put on my watch list, I got offers from.
Right.
That's when I told you to talk me out of getting a second blue one.
Yeah, I didn't do a very good job of that.
I had gotten the price had already dropped from the seller. It had dropped $5 from the original listing price. And then I had gotten the offer, which was another $5.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to make an offer then that's even less than that. And they can either counter or deny it and whatever. So I made that offer and they accepted it. Money went out. It's been shipped. It'll be here Monday or Tuesday.
That's so awesome. I love that.
Then it's just the brown one. When I got that gray one, or what they call gray, it's more khaki, or it's got a tannish tint to me. I'm like, is this the one I had?
Mm-hmm.
Because the brown that I'm thinking of in my head is the inside of a golf ball brown. It is not the brown of the ball. That's almost like a rust color.
Right.
It's really orangey. That looks odd to me. Like, I don't recall that.
Huh.
My memory doesn't work with that. So I don't know.
Right.
But that is maybe it was the short packed one of the bunch because it's the least common one to come up. Lots of blue, though. Lots of blue balls. I'm surprised I haven't said blue balls before right now.
Well, I'm excited because it's like you've entered an era. First of all, you solved the dilemma, and now you've entered the era of collecting.
Now it's a glut.
Yeah.
There's a glut of them now.
It's a glut. And that's a really cool place to be because that means you can resolve this soon, and hopefully you'll get all the colors and you'll get the versions, and then
it'll never be resolved, Ronnie. It'll never be resolved. This is going to be constant.
I sent you when you said talk me out of this, and I sent you a picture of all my mermen, and I was like, I don't know if I'm the right person to do this.
Yeah. I wasn't really sincere.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ignore pretty much anything you said anyway.
I did have some good advice, which was...
You did. Upgrade.
Yeah, if you got a good version of something, if you can find a better version, then you've got the better version. And that doesn't mean you have to hold on to all versions.
But I probably will.
But yeah, I was thinking about this acquaintance of mine in one of the Masters of the Universe groups on Facebook, and he has a whole wall of vintage stinkors, all of them at varying conditions. And there's something massively beautiful about looking at that wall of orange, black, and white. I mean, it's very cool. And I imagine his room smells like patchouli, and that's kind of cool too. It depends on your relationship to the thing.
The upgrading thing I get. The other thing, the reason I got that second blue one is because it was at the price that I was willing to pay that I haven't paid yet, which seems stupid because it's like I overpaid for that first one.
Yeah.
I got the gray one for a decent price, still a little bit much. And this satisfies at least that part. I finally got one for what I think is the correct price for these things.
Right.
There could be a time where you see them for even less because of a glut.
Yeah.
This person, they'd had those 3 blue ones up for a long time. One of them had sold, so there were 2 available when I made my offer that got accepted. So that left 1, and then someone else got that one because I saw that it was only on the ended auction listing. Well, now she has a new listing for 3 more. So that's 6 plus the one that was in the tricolor set. That's 7. So I'm even more convinced that it's that gal from the Facebook page.
Yeah. It sounds to me like it most certainly is.
Because I know it's a woman.
This means that there's, you've got this opportunity to take advantage of the opportunity, I suppose. It seems a little silly that they would be like, I'm not going to do it, and then do it.
Yeah, the very next day. I don't know. So that still seems kind of odd to me. But, get people off your back. And that thread or that post had disappeared from the Facebook page at some point because I had saved both of those posts on Facebook, and I went to my saved page, and that one was gone.
Yep. Did you get a brown one yet?
No, I just have the gray one, which to me is tan.
Yeah.
Carlita and I always...
Beige.
I mistake gray and green.
Taupe.
A lot. I'll say, I'm going to go get my green shorts. You're like, what green shorts? You don't have green shorts. These green shorts.
Yeah.
So I have the gray one, and I will have 2 blue balls.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't be the first time.
Waiting for a chuckle. by Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
But no
Very
brown
cool.
one yet.
No brown one yet, but that's on its way.
And no bouncy balls. I don't have bouncy balls.
No.
They're hollow.
Yeah, you might. Well, that's awesome. I love it. I love that it's like an epic journey. You can probably later on,
Which
when
I'm
you're
sure
feeling...
is so interesting to people out there.
It really is.
Sorry. This is what obsessive people do.
Obsess much.
Yeah, I was thinking like you could do a very special... You could edit down just our conversations about the rock balls and do a very special rock ball only epic journey episode of this whole rock ball journey, which I think would be fascinating.
Well, I promise if I get a brown one, it'll just be a very brief mention of it at some point.
Well, that needs to happen, and so I'm looking forward to that. So, this was fun. I'm excited now to go listen to statues again as I paint our cabinets, which we're in the process of doing.
And I'm going to go and get on eBay and search for plastic rock.
Search for the brown balls.
Ew. So we're not doing a location this time. We'll get back to that maybe on the next episode. And the next episode, I haven't thought about what to do, so I don't have any hints.
No, I don't have any hints either. No, no hints.
Well, then we'll skip that.
Even though we're saying we skipped the location, we talked about B. Dalton, we talked about Walden Books, we talked about Upstart Crow, which is really important. We also talked about Tower Records and Ragin' Records. So I think we got a lot of Central Valley locations into the conversation today, which is good.
Well, that'll have to count.
That'll have to count this time.
So, Ronnie, where can people find your stuff on the internet?
Head over to Skelevator on YouTube and on Instagram. Lots of cool videos and photos over in those locations. Mostly Masters of the Universe, toy-oriented, some Star Wars stuff. And on Thursday evenings, I host a toy talk show called Toy Frenzy, mostly Masters of the Universe stuff. And then on Sunday afternoons, Weekly Weirdo, Skelly's Weekly Weirdo, where I talk about a toy from the collection. Tune in to all that stuff. How about you?
You can find me at wakeupheavy.com. You can find my shows on weirdingwaymedia.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at wakeupheavy.
And it's all good stuff, folks.
Until we meet again in November, have fun, stay weird, and keep collecting.
That's right. Oh, I like that. Have fun, stay weird, and keep collecting. We need a t-shirt.